Greetings and happy Wednesday. Happy Thursday. I just got off work and I'm exhausted, but I was adamant about getting this done. So welcome to those that are here. And let me recognize you really quickly before we begin. Now, I do realize that it is Eastern Standard Time, 11:30 p.m. Many may be in their beds or perhaps working and listening in. Trust me, I understand that. So the replay will be there. Also, I'll drop the link. Some already have it, but again, they may have lives already scheduled or other things. So if need be, I will wing it with what I have. A couple of house cleaning requests that I have. Please, if you do decide to participate, whether on a panel or in the chat, please do not, I repeat, do not repeat, well, not repeat, but mention any content creators' names. You may use nicknames, that is fine, or initials, but names, no. If you do that, I'm not going to put you in timeout. I will have to block you, at least for this broadcast, because there is a witch that is flying around on their broom or perhaps on the waves riding a surfboard. And I'll leave it at that. So if we can do that, and also not trying to censor anyone, but I understand a lot of people are passionate. I can be passionate, but if, again, you want to participate, you are welcome, but keep the passion, and I don't have to elaborate on that, down a notch. So hopefully, if everyone understands that, we shall be good. And in the title, yes, I spelled it a certain way for certain reasons, but it's a sensitive topic. It is nothing new, but those of you that have been perusing these YouTube streets these last few weeks, we've heard many different things, and again, to be prudent and responsible, many things are allegations, because only the people involved will know. And again, this isn't on one particular group of people. It's a subject that has gone on for years. And before we get started, I'm going to show a small clip. And there's also a poll that I'll be checking periodically. And again, welcome to everyone that's come in. And please feel free, as I said, to engage. Just keep those house cleaning requests in mind. Also, in the description, you will see the talking points. And again, thank you, Nini Loyal, for your blessing. May it be returned abundantly. Truly, truly appreciate it. And again, welcome members, Ara and Elo's blog and Graham Fishburne TV. And welcome, Letitia. How are you this June the 1st? If the volume is okay, please let me know. And I will begin with a short clip. And it is from Tyler Perry's movie entitled Family Reunion. Now, this was a very, very intense scene. And for those of you that may not have seen the movie, it had different talking points within. However, it spoke on this very subject. Thank you, Graham Fishburne. I was about to repeat. My mic sounds nice, Jack, too, but I am not in the mood to rap tonight. But thank you, Graham. I appreciate that. So if this does not hang up, I am close to my router. Fair use, and we shall begin. Don't laugh at me, Graham. I know I'm silly sometimes. A lot of people don't get to see that side of me, but trust me. There. And I would like to welcome a very special guest. Hey there, Dr. A.H., how are you? Give me one moment. Everyone, this is Dr. A.H. I'm getting ready to show a quick clip, and we'll begin. And thank you so much for joining. Awesome. Give me one moment, sir. Okay, this clip is where the mother, played by Lynn Whitfield, was told that she was going to be exposed for allowing Vanessa, who you see here, the R word by her husband. Now I'm just going to play a snippet of it. So for those of you who did not see that film, basically what Vanessa was saying was her mother, played by Lynn Whitfield, when she was a child, placed her in the tub, put perfume on her, combed her hair, and put makeup on her, and allowed her husband to do what he did. So hopefully that will give some of you insight as to something that has been going on for years. And one of the poll questions, the first one is, do you believe grooming is still prevalent today? And I'd like to welcome at this time Dr. A.H. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you wonderfully. And for those who may not remember you, I would like to allow you to introduce yourself, and if you would like, your background, which I believe is very important, especially to this particular broadcast. And before you do that, I would like to say thank you so much for your service. And with that, I will mute my mic.
Thank you, Joe. For me, I'm a doctor of administration. I'm a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran, retired from the Army. I started out in the Marine Corps. In my career, I have worked all levels of law enforcement, from local, starting with Baltimore City, being in some federal police agencies, and working also with Department of Defense, doing some law enforcement. I've also done lots of work as far as defense and security, physical security, and intelligence and research. I've also done administration for veterans and administration for immigration enforcement.
Very extensive resume. I'm sorry, what were you saying, sir?
I said that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that's a pretty big shell and pretty big shoes that you carry. And with that, I am sure that you are well versed in this particular subject.
I'm very familiar with it. I can't say that I've worked directly going after. Well, I went after those individuals as far as encountering them, investigating them initially, and stopping them. But I haven't. I won't say like I'm a detective. I never did a detective role like you see on TV. Nothing like that.
Absolutely. So, from your experience, professional and just from observations, or perhaps some of your colleagues, what would you say outside of the textbook definition? And let me put that up real quick, and then I'll allow you to continue. Would you say the most glaring signs of groomers would be to the experienced and the non-experienced eye? So let me share this really quickly. And if you feel as though some of this is antiquated, please let me know. And if you think it is still pretty much the same today, 2023, you can also let me and those that are here know that as well. So give me one quick moment while I'll share that. And please let me know if you're able to see it as well, Dr. AH. One moment, please, and thank you.
It's very small.
Okay, I'll have to drop it in the link in the chat. But basically, I'll go over it really quickly. It says characteristics to establish a good relationship with the child and this is important, the child's family. Child groomers may do several things. They may try to gain the child's or parents' trust by befriending them with the goal of easy access to the child. A trusting relationship with the family means the child's parents are less likely to believe potential accusations. Child groomers might look for opportunities to have alone time with the child, which can be done by offering to babysit. The groomers might also invite the child over for sleepovers, for opportunistic bed sharing. They might give gifts or money to the child in exchange for, I'll just say, contact, or for no apparent reason. So with that, and again, I will drop that in the description. But your thoughts on that?
Well, the definition is doesn't change. That's definitely what happens. What I would say is today, just like any criminal aspects, they're more savvy. They're more educated, if you will, if you want to use that term, as far as how to go about things to be less obvious. Um, and you have to remember the other side of that is to have a willing, if you will, I hate to use this term, a willing victim, meaning someone that's seeking to go along, someone that's looking to form a relationship, to form a bond. So it's very extensive when you start talking about it, but we can get into that afterward.
Okay. So when you said willing, can you elaborate on that? And is there an age cap or a particular characteristic that you would consider as willing? In other words, is there a metric that has to be met that would equate to one being willing? Or is that just could it be an assumption? Is there something concrete that would say, yes, that cannot be refuted, that this individual was willing?
When I say willing, what I'm talking about when I say willing, it means someone that is particularly at risk. A while back, we did a show talking about vulnerabilities, and we explained how everyone is vulnerable out here in this world, especially out here in this world today, with the amount of information and the amount of ways in which people can come after you, people can track you, people can look you up, people can find out your information. So everyone is vulnerable. People that are at risk for grooming are potentially very much more vulnerable, meaning when a groomer is out there and they're looking for someone to make their victim or make their case, we'll stop using the word victim as much as possible, and we'll just say case. Uh, so anyone can be, think of grooming as being conned or flim-flammed or somebody getting over on you. Think about it like that. So anyone could be a potential victim of that. But when you hear the term grooming, which pretty much these days where it's referring to is children and adolescents, particularly youth, but we'll go all the way up to age 18, 19, even actually up to 21, because young ladies, young men on college campuses are just as vulnerable as some of the children that are in the elementary schools. So we'll just say, when you say grooming, we're talking about young people, particularly young people. So we say from the age of 14 and below. That's who the focus is really on when we're talking about grooming. Potentially, we hope that when someone is 15 or above, that they become a little more aware of the world and they know how things work and they know what to look out for. But that's not always the case. And we see many cases where young teenage girls are taken into trafficking. College age women are taken into kidnapping and torture and homicide and things of that nature by people who are preying on them. So again, there are people out there grooming people along. One of the things when we talk about at-risk people, the groomers are looking for someone who is basically looking alone. They're lonely. They're by themselves. Now, this may sound cliche, but when you picture in your mind the kid that's walking home from school, and if you look out on the street, you'll see a group of maybe two or three kids over here, and you'll see a group of two kids walking together on the other side of the street, and then you'll see a group of 4 or 5 kids way up the street, and then there's one kid that's walking along by itself. The groomer would be paying attention to that child. One, they're alone. Number two, they're alone. And if someone's alone, they're alone for a reason. Children are generally, as they say, we come into the world as children, innocent, wide-eyed, friendly, hopeful. And until we start experiencing traumas, we don't isolate ourselves. Once children start isolating themselves, that's an absolute sign that they're undergoing some immediate trauma or bad conditions. So once they're alone, and the groomer sees that they're alone, they know that they're alone for a reason. So there might be something going on at home. they might be the odd man out, meaning that maybe they're a heavyset child, or maybe they're a very skinny child, or maybe they're not very athletic, depending on which community you live in. Maybe they don't have a type of social look or social grace that makes them fit in with other children easily. Maybe they might be have a few mental challenges, but just enough where that they might be what we used to call considered slow, and not enough to where they can't, function in a classroom or be around other children in society. So the groomer is looking for those telltale signs. And the first one is being alone. And again, people are alone for a reason. Most of the time, it's hard for us as just as human beings. And on this podcast, you know that we're particularly talking about the Black community, but this extends to all communities. But particularly in the Black community, there are not that many places where, if you're someone who is having that kind of experience, there's not a lot of places for you to feel safe. So to find a place where you're safe enough, where you can take off the mask, if you can just so-called be yourself, you can take your armor off, you can take off the defense that you built up, and just let yourself be the vulnerable person that you are, despite the trauma and the pain and maybe the abuse that you're dealing with, and try to find a moment of peace where you can start letting yourself heal, because it's in those quiet moments, whether you're alone or around a group of people, that in those quiet moments, that's when you can start healing. That's when the healing process starts taking place. But it's slow, it's natural, it's not something quick. Everybody wants the quick fix. It's not quick, it's slow. And you basically have to surrender yourself to that process. And there's really not a lot of spaces for you to do that. We think of times when there used to be, maybe depending on where you grew up or the area you grew up in, there used to be recreational centers or special little day camps they set up for children, or maybe a relative's house, like a grandmother or an aunt or uncle, or a cousin's house, where there was just a lot of love and compassion and a lot of acceptance, and you could just go there and not have to worry about having to be in any arguments. You didn't have to worry about being attacked. You didn't have to worry about being criticized wrongly. You didn't have to worry about being in any kind of danger. So we have to remember that the person at risk of grooming, or the child at risk of grooming, is undergoing all of that, and they really want to be in those spaces. So what the groomer winds up doing is offering that, and that could come in the space of becoming a friend, becoming a willing ear that will listen, becoming a source of sustenance. You might be hungry or very needy, and maybe you need some clothes, maybe you need some school supplies, and this person, provides that stuff for you because they see you're in need. And that may be one of the reasons why you're isolating yourself, is because your family is very needy and poor, and they can't afford the brand new clothes that the other kids have on, so you're teased a lot, so you stay to yourself. And here comes this person that's like, hey, I can get you, I know a person that got some deal on some Jordans. I can get you some new tennis, so you're not feeling so bad. Or I can get you a pair of new jeans. I got a buddy that sells them. I can get them for you. Don't worry about it. I know your family, and that puts the child at ease. And next thing you know, they're becoming this outsource to this child. This person is giving them gifts or giving them things, and they start letting their guard down, or they start accepting that person into their space.
Okay, you mentioned something very, very important. Now, those characteristics that you just mentioned, could that be a direct correlation to a groomer or groomers? In other words, hi there, writer. In other words, could the groomer or groomer have the same issues of the one being groomed?
What you're finding out from the forensic psychology and the studies have shown that the people that are the abusers have experienced these same type of things in their own life. They may have been a little bit different, but the overall premise is the same. So that means if there's a person that we label as a pedophile, they have experienced those things themselves. It just doesn't come out of anywhere. That whole thing about someone is just that way and they've never experienced that. That's a rarity. Most of the time, the people have underwent that same kind of trauma themselves, and so that's how they learn it. That's how they become used to some of the things that they're seeking to act out. Remember, remember, Silence of the Lambs is the movie of the century because that one line, we covered what we see, Clarice. Meaning if you don't see it, you pretty much are not going to think about it. You're not going to want it or desire it. It takes a lot of energy to use your imagination to conjure up some things, especially things that are alternative or foreign to a natural frame of thought.
Okay, so your experience as a former officer out on the beat. I want to make sure that I'm wording this properly. And again, thank you for those coming in. Ryder and Iopo, welcome, Dr. A.H. He mentioned his resume earlier, but former Baltimore police officer and military vet. So welcome him. And again, thank you so much for your service, all that you do. And as far as blessing this platform, thank you for that as well. So please, everyone, welcome Dr. A.H. So I'm just trying to gauge everything that you're saying. And if you only knew how spot on you are. So let me ask you this from your experience. And again, perhaps conversations you may have had with some of your colleagues. Would you say sometimes, and I don't want to put a percentage out there, but some of these victims and or victimizers are products of their environment? Or could that be sometimes put in a box as quote unquote a cop-out because at a certain age one should know better? And I want to be fair. So again, this is just gauging different perspectives.
Again, when I used the term willing, the thing with the frame of mind I was coming from is a groomer essentially is in the term groomer, what we're talking about grooming, meaning they're basically setting the child or the adolescent up for some type of violation that they want to experience with them. So groomer basically breaks down barriers because most of us have natural barriers and we have barriers we learn. Okay, and children depending on the neighborhood they grow up in. Remember, when we're talking about our children, it's a little bit different. Sometimes our children can be very much more adult in their thinking and their language, even though they're still children. So they may say things and they don't really understand what they're saying to a degree, but they've witnessed it, or so they're mimicking what they've seen around them, and a lot of time that's aggressive, defensive type behavior, or fighting, or type behavior, or aggravated or conflict based behavior. So our children, particularly black children, are not the easiest to just swoop up on. That doesn't mean that they're less vulnerable. It just means sometimes if you're somebody that's going after them, you have to be aware of that. So when I say willing, what I mean is, I use that example of the loner child. So sometimes you have a loner child that's very defensive. They don't want to talk. Especially as a stranger, you try to just say hello to them, and they, kind of shy away from you, look at you like a scared animal. Or they kind of look at you and they shy away and run away. They don't want to say hello. They don't want to speak. They just want to get away from you as soon as possible, which is a signal of something else. But a lot of times that's what you see. They're wary. But then there's children, is particularly if they're loners. They may be looking for someone to have as a friend, and they don't care that the person is older. To them, it doesn't strike them as being out of place that this adult is, or this older child that's out of their age range, is looking to befriend them, or be nice to them and be around them. If you're a child that's 10 and a 15 or 16-year-old is trying to hang out with you or keep you around them, that's not a family member. Even if they're a family member, you have to kind of be wary. But if there's just some kid that lives up the street, some teenager that lives up the street, is like, well, what is this 16-year-old trying to hang out with this 10-year-old for? What do they have them around them? And it doesn't matter if it's same sex or it's opposite sex. Most time with opposite sex, as people, we're much more wary and apprehensive of that. We don't want to see 16-year-old boys hanging out and messing around with 10-year-old girls. But a lot of times we let it go when we see 16-year-old boy hanging out, or having a 10-year-old hanging around him. And that's just as wrong. In fact, sometimes, in most cases, is worse, because there are other situations that are going on there. Again, is most people, water will seek its own level. A teenager is not seeking to hang out with a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. If you think back, when you were 18, most people would say when they were 18, all they could think about was when they could be 21, when they could reach the age when they could drive. Or if you were 15, you couldn't wait till you were 16 so you could drive the car, get your license, or get your work permit so you could go make your own money. Whatever the case may be, you wanted to get to that next level. You weren't looking to go down. Most teenagers, when you tell them, oh, you got to watch your younger brothers and sisters, they don't really want to do it, but they know that they got a responsibility, so they do what their parents tell them. But most teenagers don't want to engage with younger children. So when you see that, you have to pay attention. Just like when you see an adult, a lot of times I have been in places, both as law enforcement and as just a regular civilian, and saw suspicious behavior by men, both black and white, seeking to be around children when it was, I don't want to say inappropriate, but it was peculiar. So just like how you go in law enforcement, you say there's a reasonable suspicion and then there's probable cause. You go like it. Sometimes it's all together. Sometimes it's step 1, 2, and 3. Well, when you see something peculiar and then that sets it up for something suspicious, and then it's like, hey, what are you doing here messing around with these kids? And in a few of those instances, that's what was going on. When you see an adult that is just making it their business to be in a children's space or be in a space where there's just children around, particularly men, it's like, okay, is something going on here? And you just keep your eye on it. You don't you don't have to jump on them right away, but in law enforcement, you have a saying that goes, you give them enough rope to hang themselves, and
Absolutely.
basically their behavior. I remember my father used to say this all the time. It's like they can't help themselves. They're going to reveal who they are if you're paying
Amen.
attention.
Amen. You don't know how you are knocking it out the park. Seriously, if like Patti LaBelle said, if only you knew. I'm going to get to a couple of comments before too many get past me. Graham has put on the screen. Again, Graham, thank you. Poverty plays a
Hey,
major
Grant.
role. Yes, remember Graham. Graham is one of my special ones. Very outspoken, but he keeps it real. He says, poverty plays a major role in the situation. Also, he follows up with, an impoverished person is a sadistic or perverted person's dream. And if you want to go back to any of these, please let me know. Iopa Yapa, thank you for joining in, says, my wife and I have this conversation fairly often. We call it the eternal question, at what point does a person become responsible for their actions? I would like to chime on that one really quickly. Sometimes I believe, depending upon their mindset, ego, they may never, and that's just my opinion. Ryder says, and thank you, Ryder, I believe most predators suffer from trauma that was inflicted on them, and they were overpowered, and couldn't defend themselves. So as adults, they pick on the weak, a child they can groom. Then we have Graham saying, hurt people, hurt people. Iopa says, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, hurt people, damaged people, damage people. It is cliche, but true. And then they're agreeing with one another. Ryder says, I know exactly what I would love to do to a predator if we didn't have laws. I would leave it in God's hands. That's just my opinion. And then Iopa says, how to break the cycle is the question. And I'll leave this one up. The answer, of course, complex, or else we would have solved it by now. The cycle must be broken, though. This thing must, and he put must in all caps, be figured out. And Graham says, my experience, God is best at making things right and exact. And everyone is speaking. Hey, spiritual. Oh, okay, thank you. So I'm going to keep this comment from Iopa Yapa, who says, how to break the cycle is a question. The answer, of course, complex, or else we would have solved it by now. The cycle must be broken, though. This thing must be figured out. So Dr. A.H., your thoughts on that very poignant and important comment from Mr. Iopa Yapa. Thank you, sir.
Yes, all those comments were great. The common denominator is Ilpa said it best. Well, I want to. Two of those comments will help answer it. The first thing is where Graham said, an impoverished person is a sadistic person's dream, or meaning that like that's their Thanksgiving dinner. Like they've been waiting on that. We talked about it before when a sadistic or perverted person's dream, and he is 100% correct. When we talked about vulnerabilities, when we talked about uh, deviance in our community, if you remember what I said it's something along those same lines. Is that the predators out there are looking for that. When they ask them, when they talk to them, they admit and tell them they look for those individuals, particularly because they know these are people who are forgotten. These are people who the community or the state or the local government doesn't really care about. These are people who don't have the resources to fend for themselves in the legal system. One of the persons brought up the thing about we live in a system of under laws and the rule of law, and that as we are gaining momentum on the information, we are readily seeing that that whole rule of law thing uh, is very skewed, particularly when it comes to so-called people of color. But what we're really talking about is whether you want to say ADOS, American Descendants of Slave, whether you want to say FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, whichever label you choose, when we're talking about Black people, Black American people, uh, we are the ones that system does not seem to fan out well. And that has been historic, that has been systematic, and it continues to this day. And at some point, we're either going to stop depending on that system or we're going to get the reformations in that system that we need. There are certain countries where such things as grooming and child sexual trafficking is not an issue. Now, they have other issues, but that particular issue is not something that they have to deal with. In fact, many of the countries where the indigenous family is the major population, the people that come in and perpetrate those things don't look like us. Let's just put it that way. They come from all over the world and they don't look like us. And that is the number one thing that they're doing. And that's why they're going there, because the people are impoverished and they know they have enough money and clout that they can do the type of things they want to do, and nobody's going to say anything or be the wiser. That they can't get it. It's hard for them to get away with that in their own countries because of the laws and because of the popular opinion. They know that people just won't tolerate it. And there's some people that will take the law into their own hands. They will not wait for the system to do what it needs to do. And that's happening more and more because people see that they can't afford to wait for the system to give them some kind of peace of mind or some kind of justice.
I think, Ryder, if you can see the comment on there, somewhat mirrored what you said in a way, but he basically states, Graham, I get your point, but in my position, I can't wait on God to give his judgment on someone that's involved with, I'll just say, pedo. You can see that, but I just shortened it a little bit. I truncated it just a little bit. So with that, and a lot of people hold that same sentiment. Others may not, but again, this is no judgment here. This is a conversation, a discussion, and everyone is welcome to dialogue. Dialogue is healthy. So you mentioned laws. I want to share something with you really quick, Dr. A.H. and everyone else. And we're going to go on to something that may be sticky for some, confusing to some, confusing to me just a little. And it is ages of consent in the United States. So, one moment, and again, this is fair use. Hopefully everyone will be able to see it. If not, I'll make sure that it is in the description and chat. And Majority ages, surprisingly to me, 16. As you can see here on this chart, DC, 16. Maryland, also 16. But if you look at this chart here, it actually says 14. With the way this metrics is put, it's a little, let me go back up, confusing. Where is that chart? Here we go. By authority. So I think that's the difference, the authority. Illinois, 17. And you could just go down, and I'll put that in there. So the majority is 16, 17. And I'll just read this first quick paragraph, and it says, while the unrestricted age of consent is between 16 and 18, which I think most people know, but perhaps if not, you know now, in all United States, the laws have widely varied across the country in the past. In 1880, the ages, wow. In 1880, the ages of consent were set at 10 or 12 in most states, with the exception of Delaware, where it was 7. I don't even want to read anymore because that made me sick on my stomach. But I'll make sure that that is definitely in there. And Graham says, no disrespect taken. I can't stand pedos or rappos either. Thank you so much for ad-libbing. So, Dr. AH, question, and this has been floating around the YouTube streets. In your opinion, not your professional outlook, or then again, you could use that because this is something that you worked in. Even if the age of consent is 16 for a young lady or a girl, teenager, and say the young gentleman is 24, 25, or 26. According to that chart, and for some states, legally, it's not against the law. When do we bring in morals, or do we? In your opinion?
Well, what I have to say is twofold. First off, we do live in a nation of laws. We do have to follow the laws system of the laws. Are just think of it as when everybody talks these days about being on code, think of the laws as our code. Whether you want to believe in them or not, they're there, and it behooves you to know them because if you cross them, you can find, particularly if you look like me, there's a place for you that they want to put you in. Under those codes and laws, we have what you showed as the minimum age of consent, meaning the age that someone can say that or give their approval, or it'd be okay for them to agree to engage sexually with another individual. Now, what you particularly asked about, I think you said a 16-year-old girl and a 24-year-old guy, right?
Hypothetically, yes.
Right. So for me, if I had a 16-year-old daughter, I would hope that I have given her enough instruction and guidance along with her mother to make a better decision about that. But we know that sometimes that's not the case. You may not like it, And so that's something that you and your household is going to have to deal with. And everybody's household is different. Everything from skinning the girl halfway alive to inviting the boy in and setting him up with a meal and asking him if he want to live there. I have seen several different scenarios. Trust me. Now, me being the Southern Baptist strict upbringing that I was under, that ain't happening. And there's going to be some accountability and some things happening when that's found out. Let's just put it that way. What we sometimes forget is that when our children break the door, we're no longer in control. Whatever we've given them is what they have, and they're going to have to make those tough decisions, particularly young ladies. Now, if it was voluntary, I would be wrong for hurting that young man, or like some people want to say, unaliving him. That's not correct in my view. I know some other people who are different, particularly if they come from a different country or have a different way of life. That's something that American young men need to be aware of, with all the people that are coming into the country that are from different places, and they're going to school with these young women. And sometimes the temptation of being from under your parents' eyes and being able to do something that you wanted to do, or so-called be grown, gets the better of them. And we have all this influence being pushed on the young people right now, and as a parent, there is only so much you can do. That's why you have to constantly, you have to think of it as yourself. I always tell parents that think of yourself when you were 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. Yes, it was a different time. Yes, your parents may have been more strict, but that probably didn't stop you from going after a few of those teenage things that you really wanted to do. Now, you might not have necessarily crossed the line, but I can say that majority of people will tell you they definitely stepped up to the line and looked at it. Okay, so we have to be illegal process. You have to take the law in your own hands. Right now, we see a lot of people taking the law in their own hands. Like I said, if you found that out about your 16-year-old daughter and the guy was 24, would you be right for going to do something to that guy? If it was consensual, meaning she says, yes, I had sex with this 24-year-old guy and I like him and I've been seeing him and I decided to go and do that. What do? That's something you have to deal with your daughter on, particularly if you can get to the young man, which if you didn't already know him, you probably didn't, and that's one of the reasons why that took place. There are some things that we got away from in our community that a lot of the people in the progressive mindset of today will tell you that it was oppressive and it was treating the girls wrong, and you didn't give them their freedom of choice and you didn't give them the ability to do X, Y, and Z. And sometimes people need to just be quiet, because there's some things set in place that may seem restrictive at the time, but they will save you a lot of heartbreak and trouble later on down the road.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me get in a few of these comments. Iopa says, at what age are people mature enough to engage in something as mind-altering and soul-binding as intimacy, not to mention child rearing? I think 18 is still too young, though they do it. So chat your feelings on Iopa Yapa's comment. He believes 18 is still too young, even though I just put up a chart earlier that you could see in most states, legally, they're saying 16. And if you paid attention to the chart back in the 1880s, it was lower than that.
Yes. We have to, sometimes we really don't have the knowledge of history that we should. We were held to, life was much different in the earlier generations. Like some of us, if we're Gen X's, we can look at our parents' generation and understand that life was very different. A lot of the luxuries and a lot of the conveniences that we as a community enjoy right now, as Gen Xers, our parents were not able to enjoy those. Our parents weren't able to go to places they wanted. They weren't able to travel freely throughout the country like they wanted. They weren't able to stop and find respite in places that they wanted to stop at. Everybody saw that movie, The Green Book, that talked about how black people, when they were traveling the country, had to know which black network and which towns to avoid, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of things that just in a few generations have made life, regardless of what we think, very different for us. And so the outlook is different. But we were held to a different standard. The country was, and the mindsets of people were. Okay, when you go to Europe, if people have never been to Europe, when you go to Europe, the young people are allowed to drink and go to nightclubs and bars and stuff up to a certain time. Okay, the youth in Europe are held to a higher standard and are much more mature than the youth in America. And that's not because they're smarter or they have some special gift. It's because of the expectation and what they're held. When you go to Asia, the youth are very mature and very disciplined. When you go to certain parts of Africa, the youth are very disciplined and very mature about handling life things. Okay, our expectation is what will build the maturity. And our community, we used to have it because we used to understand that we didn't have the resources and we didn't have the ability to get out of certain situations that we would get ourselves into. So we kept a close eye on the children. We kept a close eye on ourselves, and we policed each other to make sure that none of us would get caught up in things that we didn't need to be caught up in, because there was no money to get you out of jail. There was no lawyers to help you get out of a jam that you got in for not following the laws. There was no ready place to go to handle the unexpected pregnancy that you could just do something and forget about it. Yes, things have always been around there. So people want to make exceptions, but that was not the standard. That was not the usual. The usual was if you got pregnant, you're going to have a baby. That was how it was. Okay. If you made a young girl pregnant, that young girl, now you're going to have to take care of her and that baby. That whole thing about shotgun weddings, that wasn't a joke. That was real. Okay. That whole thing about, what this Nearly Full of Junior say, the little shack by the track where, if Sally got pregnant in the city, she would take the baby back to the country to the little shack by the railroad track where, grandma could watch the baby while she was in the city working and send money back to help take care of the baby because she couldn't take care of the baby in the city. It was too expensive and she had to work. Okay. So if she got to the city and got foolish, there was a couple of ways to handle that, but that was pretty much it. It wasn't a whole lot of, oh, well, we're going to get some daycare or, we can pay some Miss Millie down the street to watch them. No, that wasn't always the case for a lot of folks. So we have to remember the expectation was different. And so we can get back to that. But again, that's people coming together and saying, okay, first it starts with you, then your household, and then that extends to your neighbors and your family, your extended family, and then to your community, each one. And that's very difficult to do today because we have a very individualistic mindset. And in the other thing, when we talked about vulnerability, we talked about that, how we don't do the things that we used to do to make sure that the children were safe, that our families and friends were safe, that the women were safe, and that the men didn't get themselves into things they didn't need to get caught up in, and that everybody could live as peacefully as possible, because there was nowhere else for you to go and there was no other outlet for you. When you are faced with the reality of we only have what we have and we only have ourselves to work with, people start waking up and understanding how they have to operate then. Unfortunately, it's too little too late for us.
Absolutely. And if I may chime in, you were mentioning about other countries. I remember when we went on our class trip, I was 15 at the time, we went to Canada. You could get as much booze as you wanted. And when I say some of my classmates lost their minds, that's not the only thing some of them lost. And I will leave it. I'm serious. And I will leave it
Yeah.
at that.
Well, that's why in some cultures that alcohol is forbidden. There's a reason for that.
Absolutely. IOPA says consent is based upon a full knowledge of what is involved when it comes to anything. Young people don't know all of the permutations, so technically it may not be possible to consent technically. Your thought on that? Thank you, IOPA.
Well, that's true. But here's the whole thing about all of that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't start at the moment. It starts long before that. It's a walk up to that point. At certain points in your life, you're going to come to those moments when you're going to have to give consent. And sometimes, without realizing it, we give consent by not saying no, by not walking away, by not leaving the area. That is your consent to what's going on. That's your consent to being okay with what you're seeing. That's your consent with being okay with being a part of the party, being a part of the action. When the cop pulls you over in the stolen car and you and your buddies are in it, they don't care that you're in the back seat. You're all going to jail because you're riding in the stolen car. Okay. When the car stops and everybody jumps out running and they catch the ones that they catch, they don't care if you were driving or not. Now they try to get you to say who was driving, but it doesn't matter. You were all a part of what was going on, and you consented to that because you didn't stop and say, "Hey, wait a minute, whose car is this? Let me out of here. I know you don't have enough money to get this car, or I know this ain't your grandma's car. Your grandma don't have a car." You don't do that. You just, right, well, I'm gonna roll on for the ride because I want to be part of the action. I want to be part of the fun. Okay, and that's what happens. That's what happens to our young people. And like you said, when they're in a space or there's an opportunity, uh, and they get a little more freedom or they get a little more chance to make some choices, a lot of times they make the wrong ones because the instruction and the information, as Iyapo talked about, the information isn't there. You can't just tell young people not to do stuff. You have to tell them reasons why. Or you have to tell them, if you do this, these are what is probably going to happen. Now, there's a chance that you might so-called get lucky, or you might get some favor and get out of that situation, but more than likely you're not. And what's going to happen is this: look around you. Look at the people over here. Look at the people over here. Look at the people over here. This is what they did, and this is what's going on with them. So if you don't want that, you have to not make that choice. You have to, like you said, it's correct. Giving consent talks is it. They assume that you have the full information. See, one of the reasons you have the age of consent that you have now, and most everybody went to 16. I remember when it was 15. Here's a true story for you. I was a 20-year-old Marine in Millington, Tennessee. I had a buddy that had this adult girlfriend who was much older than him, because we were young guys, 20, 21. And this woman was much older. And when you're a young man, you don't care about that. You care about what you care about. It's particularly if you're a young Marine. So he was like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Her niece is here in town, and the woman had a young child that the niece was watching. So basically he's like, hey, I need you to hang out with the niece so me and her can go and have our good time, and and you guys can hang out, and there's a pool there and you'll have fun. So I'm like, oh, man, your friend calls you. So you're like, okay, I'll go with you. I didn't know this girl looked like or whatever. And I knew the woman was older. So when they pulled up, this woman was in the back, and I thought she was a full-grown woman. Because she was from Alabama visiting, and this was in the 80s. Okay, and this girl had a body that she looked like a full-grown woman. Okay, let's just put it that way. Looks alone, that was a full-grown woman. So I get in the car, and now I'm scared because I think I'm 20 years old, sitting next to this full-grown woman. And I'm like, oh, man, I thought, she was going to be, 17, 18 years old. Okay, I could talk to her. I wouldn't mind hanging out with her. Here's this full-blown woman. So we go to the place. We hang out at the pool. And, things go on their way. And, we start becoming affectionate. And so one thing leads to another, and we're in this precarious situation now. And we're about to move to the next step. And something just hit me, and I don't know why. And I asked her, I said, how old are you? And she looked at me and said, I'm 15 years old. And I was like, you gotta be lying to me. No way you're 15 years old. And she reached down, because we were laying on something, and she reached down and pulled out in her purse and pulled out her school ID. And she was 15 years old. And
how old were you, sir?
20. And my heart just sunk. I was like, oh, man.
I'm sure that wasn't the only thing. Sorry about that.
You're right. And that's all we're going to say about that.
Yes. Ooh,
and, so, she was like, oh, and of course, she asked me how old I was, and I was 20. And then she was like, oh, well, I thought you were younger. And so I'm thinking she's older. She's thinking I'm younger. So, of course, everything stopped right at that point. And that always stuck with me, because it was looks alone. You can't go on looks alone. Okay. And you always tell the men that you cannot go on looks. And I can tell you from experience working the street in Baltimore, there was plenty of times that they had to escort young ladies back to their house who would lie and say they were 16, 17 years old, and they were 13 and 14 years old. And there was grown men waiting to spend some time with them, put it that way.
Absolutely. Iopa says, as I think about it, monogamy adds a different perspective. And we have another guest. Let me get him up real quick. I'll continue to read this. Hey, Coach D.
Welcome. Hey, Doaz. How you doing, Queen?
I am doing well. I have Dr. A.H., who's already on the panel, former Baltimore police officer and military veteran. So,
how you doing, brother?
All right. How you doing?
Great.
And this is Coach D, a licensed therapist. So I am elated to have you both on the panel. We're talking about grooming. We're going to go into jackets, and then later, briefly, online inappropriate behaviors and mental health as far as putting this all together. But this is something I think Coach D could answer. And Iopa has it on the screen, and I'll read it out. And I think as Coach D, he's a dating coach as well, who believes in marriage, says, as I think about it, monogamy adds a different perspective. Two things that seldom happens anymore: retiring from a company and 40, 50, 60-year marriages. That may be a factor. So, Coach D, your thought on that as far as engaging in relations at very young ages. I'm not sure how much you caught before you jumped on, but I put up a chart where the majority of the ages of consent was between 16 and 18. And then I read a little quick history fact that back in the 1800s, 1880 to be exact, they're even younger than that, down to 13. So your thoughts on age of consent and grooming. I'll put my mic on mute. And again, welcome and thank you.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting topic, and I have discussed that before on numerous occasions in certain sectors. And I was unable to. I came in late because I knew you were starting your live stream late, so I came in a little later than when you made me aware of the time. But traditionally, just thinking about things in the South, traditionally the South has been very lax with the age of consent, and it has not been till recently that there has been modifications of the age of consent. Um, when I look at my own family, and I can just go speak in regards to aunts, uncles, even my mother. She was married at 16. She got married at 16 years old, 17 years old, and the guy she married was like 21. My grandfather, he married my grandmother. On my paternal grandfather married, he was 22 and she was 17. But they were dating before that. They were they'd gotten married at that, but they probably dated a year or two before that, that marriage occurred. One of my aunts, who's the third to oldest, she got married and left home at 16 years old to a guy that was like almost 30 years old. And they had a long marriage that lasted about 65 years. I do think that when we look at the age of consent, I am happy that there has been modifications that have caused that to increase. I've had numerous arguments with guys thinking that there's nothing wrong with 13, 14, 15-year-olds consenting as long as the parents basically sanction it. Growing up in rural Louisiana, I actually know parents and have seen this with some of my own friends. I have seen where the parents sanction their daughters to be with grown men at 14, 15, 16 years old. I've seen numerous, and this is more common, particularly in rural areas than what we would think. Like this is not an anomaly. This is very common, and particularly in the South. I mean, it was very common. Matter of fact, I remember one girl was scrutinized when I was a senior in high school. She was pregnant, and she had a child at the age of 16. She transferred from another school, but she had a child for a guy that was 25 years old. She was 18, and they were dating at least one or two. No, they were not married, but they were together. They continued to date, And the guy was 25 and she was 18. So when they first met, he was like 23 and she was like maybe 15 years old. The mom knew, she sanctioned it, and they continued to go out. She would go hang out with him and go on dates and do all kinds of stuff as if she was a grown woman. I mean, I know I have so many examples of that, seeing that growing up, as you know, and basically, a child could get married as long as the parent get, you know, what legally in Louisiana during that time, a child under 18 could get married with the consent of the parents. And there were some high school students that I knew that actually got married and quit school, and they married an adult guy. I seen that happen. I had a girl that I actually liked that we didn't officially ever date, but we flirt and we would secretly talk on the phone when we were dating other people, and we were always like we would always like secretly talk to each other, and this happened from the time I was a freshman up until I was a junior, and she married a guy that was damn near in his mid-30s, and she was 18, she was 17, and they were messing around before that because she told me that she had dealt with him on and off, and her parents gave her consent to marry a guy that was in his 30s. You know, these things happen, and the culture in the South, I don't understand why it's that so, but they've been very lax about this type of thing. I don't agree with adults having sex with underage people, 17, 18 years and under. I think that you know, excuse me, that needs to be strict. It need to be stricter about that. I don't think that parents should consent to their children marrying adults until I feel like marriage should be an adult marrying another adult, not a teenager marrying an adult. Neither should it be a teenager marrying a teenager per se, you know. But this is something I seen and it was normalized, and you know, and I do think that a lot of the statutory laws in spirit tried to change it, but what ended up happening, there were teenagers that were actually being prosecuted. Let's say a 17-year-old, you know, having sex with a 13 or 14, you know, that and to me that wasn't the true spirit of the law. And when that occurred, it caused kids like that to be prosecuted and held to the law. So I'm definitely not a person that's for a person that's not an adult to consent to having sex with an adult. That's my main stance on that. And I've even seen situations where, and there's a couple of YouTubers that I know that even talked about this, where they were dating a guy. They were like 16, 17, 16, 15 years old. He was like 25, 23. And when they became older, they ended up getting married, not realizing that they were being groomed. Because some of those relationships don't start off like, you know, we're dating or we're sexual. It starts off like some of them have talked about, where the guy may just be nice, pick you up from school, take you, you know, whatever, maybe buy you clothes, do little things, particularly if you come from a poor background, and he providing little things here and there for you that you need. And it's a non-sexual thing. And then later on, it becomes, you know, sexual and intimate and so forth. And then you not realize that you're being exploited. And usually the adult in that position, adult male, you know, basically tries to control that person and treat them as a token. And I've known many women that got caught up in that as young women, where they thought a person was doing these things for them, supporting them financially. And when they became adults and they continued to date them or marry them, they basically took control of them. And, you know, they were psychologically abusing them and using financial abuse to keep them in order. So those are some of the perspectives that I have seen. You know, I think that like I said, it's a lot more common in our culture. It's a lot, very, very much common in rural America, you know, of these things happening. So that's my perspective on that.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach D. Welcome, Aunt T. How are you?
What's going on, Dope? D. Durrell.
What's up, Aunt?
What's going on? Peace, everybody.
Aunt T, Dr. A.H. is here as well.
What's up, Mr. Dr. A.H.? I called you Mr. A.H. My bad, Dr. A.H. What's going on?
Okay, he's speaking back with the wave. So, your perspective. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
No, I just say hey to.
Peace. Yeah, if I can just jump on that, because I know indeed I think D. Durrell was probably up there with me when I was breaking down it was like a poll. It was specific to different like demographics of men and when they become fathers, and people were kind of misusing the stats and things like that. But a disturbing statistic was men under the age of between the ages of 15 and 19. You know, so as far as black men are concerned, they become fathers at about like a 3.1. It's like 3.1% or something like that. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's like more than twice that of any closer demographic. You know, that they become. So it's more teenage fathers within the black community than any other community. You know, in the United States.
Facts.
So, and I thought that was the most alarming stat. You know, they were trying to use the stat to say, oh well, X amount of percentage of black men are single and childless, or it's kind of close to other demographics. I'm like, that's the alarming one that you really can't leave out. So, you know, what does that really mean right there? You know, it means pretty much babies having babies, and then the cycle just keeps continuing. It's pretty much it. You know, yeah, babies having babies. So I don't condone. I'm with a D. Durrell on that. I don't condone adults being with children under any damn circumstances. What does an adult have in common with a child? Yeah.
Absolutely. But if you look at and I showed it earlier, and I believe Dr. A.H. Shares your sentiment, legally 16 to 18. So are you wanting to say screw that law and bring in morals, or your feelings on that?
Well, I mean, I think, all right, so I think what like D. Durrell was saying earlier, and I'm fond of that. I think it shouldn't be any more than like a 3 to 4 year age gap. You know, for the most part, if they're able to go to the same school, what can you really charge someone with? You know, if one's, because a 17-year-old can end up getting with, you know, a 14-year-old that's about to be 15 or something like that. And then at some point, you know, they can be, you know what I'm saying, this kid can be 18, you know, while she's still 15, you know. So do you put somebody in jail for that? So I don't think that's that big of a deal when you're dealing with teenagers. But when you're talking about people that are 21, 22, 23 years old with 15-year-old, that's a problem. Like if you're able to sign a damn lease for your own apartment, or you know, pretty much if you're able to legally marry somebody without the consent of or just legally marry somebody, period, you shouldn't be with a child.
Okay, Dr. A.H., I'm going to throw something else into the mix. Graham mentioned it earlier, as did Ryder. Poverty plays a large role in this. And again, this is just opinions and perspectives. you have a situation where the child or a young adult may be a runaway, ward of the state. There could be the use of drugs, perhaps gang activity for the groomers, and those who may be groomed or potentially subsequently victims of being groomed. Your thoughts on that, Dr. A.H., then Coach D, and then Aunt T, if you put that into the mix. Your thoughts on that. And no formal education.
Okay, so I guess the bigger part of that for me would have to be when you, in some of the past shows, when I talked about the fact that, the whole thing when everybody was talking about the reparations and do we need the money, it's like, yes, of course you need the money. Of course you need the resources. And that's one of our biggest problems. And because people are playing this nickel and dime game of so-called pimping and hooking and prostitution out there, in the chase for these resources that's constant in our community because we just don't have it. So when you're a person in poverty, you're a person who's undergoing these cycles of poverty, these cycles of just, trying to make it through, trying to not be the one that everybody's going to come after, which turns to make us isolationists. Once we've so-called made it, or we got out of the ghetto, then well, I don't want my mother calling me every month, or I don't want my sisters and brothers leeching off me. So let me get out of here and get away. And so we just broken down, and we've broken down our community, our family systems, and the poverty is just staggering right now. There's so many black men out of doors. There's so many single mothers that just are trying to make ends meet. There's so many communities full of blight and just at the mercy of all the predators that are running around because there's nobody to stop them and nobody can take the chance because, if you take the chance to stop them, then you're going to be put in the jam, and now your resources are put on the line. Your life is put on the line. So it's just this continuing cycle that's just spiraling out of control. And for the predator that's looking, it's just an opportune time for them. Crime is mostly opportunistic. We don't have these megalomaniacs that are running around like you see in the movies, like, oh, I'm going to come up with this grand scheme and, I'm going to still need like 10 women and I'm going to put them in this house and gate it all up. And then I'm going to charge people to come in and be with them. And I'm like, you can have one or two of those kind of goofballs out there, but for the most part, it's opportunists. And that's unfortunate because that makes you constantly on edge. You never have a moment's peace of being able to put your guard down. You never have a moment where you can really trust your neighbor or really trust the people that live on your block because you don't know who's going to be the next one to get robbed or somebody gets over on you or somebody, oh, let me borrow all this $100, man. I promise you I'm going to pay you back payday. And of course they never do. And now you're out that money and you needed that money to pay your bills. Just constantly, you don't have a sense of all this joy and peace and pursuit of happiness that our country is supposed to be made up of. We don't get to experience that. And so when you're talking about grooming, Coach Z brought it up earlier when he talked about how some young women were groomed. Remember, I said at the beginning that anybody can be susceptible to this. And it's not just, again, for the purposes of what we talk about, a lot of times that has to do with the adolescents. It has to do with the people that are attracted to and getting their jollies by messing around with children. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. It could be either way, male or female. It could be people that are just straight. They're looking for somebody for an advantage. For a lot of say so-called older men, I can tell you from working the street and working around, uh, there were several older men. I'm talking about men, retirees from 65 up, that KRS-One had a song that said the girlies are free because the crack costs money. Okay. And so regularly, these older men would be out rummaging through the ghettos in the mornings, seeing who they could pick up. Sometimes, if they lived on a particular edge or a certain side of the ghetto where we were policing and patrolling, and we would get calls, we had to go to the house because the girl is acting up. This older man has had this girl staying there where he's been feeding her drug habit, but he's been having her stay there to enjoy her being able to stay there. Just put it that way, and using whatever she has to offer him. Um, so there's all kinds of people using this poverty situation and all the things that go with it. The drug abuse, the substance abuse, the child abuse, the domestic abuse, the partner violence. Okay, there are plenty of times, if you find some honest ones, police will tell you that there are partners who, once their partner is taken away, they'll proposition you with coming back for a good time. Now that the man, or particularly if the woman, is gone now out of the house and they have their freedom to do whatever it is they want. Uh, there are all kinds of things that go on in our community. Remember when we talked about the deviance and how that plays a role. We have this moral sense where we say, okay, well, these are the things we want to have happen. But to really bring those things about takes not just the mindset, but it takes several layers of action that that constantly have to build off one another. And sometimes they get, like you're building a stack of blocks, sometimes they get knocked down. You got to rebuild them. So you have to constantly rebuild them. You got to fortify them, keep them strong. Okay, so next time somebody tries to knock them down, they only get so many knocked down. It's so grueling, because every time somebody makes a mistake or does the wrong thing, or the person that you didn't think would be the person to do something like that gets caught and it lets you down, it just rattles the community at the core, because now, again, you're always vulnerable. So you don't know who to trust. And so you just constantly live in this state of not being able to trust anybody, and you're never at peace.
Okay. Coach D, your thoughts on the prevalence of being in an impoverished state and how it correlates with groomers and those being groomed, and then Aunt T after Coach D. Thank you, Dr. A.H. Is Coach D there? If not, you can go ahead, Aunt T.
Yeah, I'll go in while we wait on to come back.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think being impoverished is going to play a role in it, just naturally, because, and this comes into play with, like what D. Durrell was saying, when parents give the consent, and it's something that's not even necessarily frowned upon anymore, because that can be seen as some kind of form of success. Get a hold of a man that's got something going on for himself, that can do something for you. A lot of times that's going to be an older man. When they're talking about the financial, the financial ramifications, this could be the guy that gets you out of poverty. This could be the path to home ownership that your family has never had for whatever reason. And unfortunately, you're going to have a lot of, older people, older people that are in that position that are going to use that to their advantage. And that's not just men. Women do it too. Women do that with younger dudes all of the time. Guy has nothing going on. She's got a house, she's got a career, she's willing to buy him a car and all of that other stuff. So boom, he's along for the ride. Next thing you know, she's got a grown adult third child or fourth child or whatever. And a lot of men prey on young ladies too, with their quote unquote resources. So yeah, it definitely plays a role.
So I'm waiting for Coach D's perspective when he returns on that. So if that plays a role, at what point as an adult, meaning over the age of 20 now, perhaps 25, 26, does it end? Or where does the person see, or do they see, that this behavior is wrong morally and
All right,
perhaps
I'm back.
legally? Oh, no problem, Coach D. We're talking about the correlation with being impoverished and in certain situations, if you will, where there's drug use, or perhaps one being a runaway, ward of the court, things of that nature. The correlation between that and one being groomed, or the groomer.
Well, in my experience in seeing that, and just in my profession, I've seen this a lot as it relates to kids being in impoverished situations, and you have adults who are willing to take advantage of those kids being in those situations. I mean, we have certain situations that we know of where people were basically given away or sold to adults. Particularly in the crack era, there was a lot of teenage girls that were basically given to older men for certain financial circumstances. And because of the state of our community and the survival mode that a large percentage of our community is in, these things are more prevalent. And when people are in a state of survival, they lose their morality. So these things surface, and in the Black community, that is evident. It's something that's not talked about enough.
No,
So
and I need to ask you something, not meaning to cut you off, but this is something, and I'm going to leave some links at the end so you all can go check these out. This was actually said, and I don't mean to sound ignorant, but if I don't know the answer to something, I'm going to ask it. You said that some parents actually sold.
yes,
How,
yes.
how does that happen, or how can I put this? How would that look? Meaning,
Okay.
how is it done? And again, I do not mean to sound ignorant, but I've heard it. But is it a phone call? Is it a conversation? I mean, what type of transaction? How does a transaction such as that actually look? If that's
Okay.
clear.
And
I'm
so
sorry.
when I talk about that, it's several situations. As far as what I have seen, most of the situations when I've seen a parent financially gain for giving their child away to an older adult, usually that parent has some type of substance abuse issue, and they probably already knew that their child was having sex with this adult. And being that they're in the state of mind that they're in, the perpetrator negotiated a certain amount of money to support that person's habit in order to have, unlimited access to their child. And in some of those situations, that adult eventually married that person. Um, the other situations that I've seen was as it relates to human trafficking and pimping, pretty much. Where now it's human trafficking now. But I have seen as a professional many situations where the mother probably was an ex-prostitute or something like that, or grew up in that type of game or in that type of environment, and they basically, use their child over time to do those type of acts for money, and eventually sold their child away to somebody to work, to be under somebody else's tutelage that was basically trafficking them. I've also seen situations, as we alluded to earlier, where we talked about how an adult parents were giving their children consent to marry somebody that was some type of financial gain that they were receiving by allowing their underage child, to be with this adult person. And they agreed to a certain amount of money, or you were going to do certain things financially in order for that to happen. And I've seen a mixture of those three examples.
Okay, Auntie, and quickly, isn't this cultural?
This happens across all social, economical, and racial backgrounds.
Absolutely. Okay, Auntie, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, can you repeat the question? I would agree with what I heard D. Durrell say, but can you repeat the question?
Yes, we were speaking about, I wanted to know what an actual transaction entailed.
Oh, I know what I've heard, but I, just like D. Durrell said, yeah, that is something that goes on across a lot of demographics. The one of the best cases I can think of to just mention is like, R. Kelly, of course. And of course, it's gone on more that you don't know about. But I believe, parents were involved. They were paid for what their children, were able to do with, this person of means or notoriety. And, that's what happened. I mean, so I guess sometimes it's finances, upfront finances. Sometimes it's the promise of some kind of fame, connection, getting you into some kind of social circle or something like that. But yeah, it's marriage is usually transactional in a lot of places in the world. And when I say marriage, I don't mean just jump in the broom and stuff like that, but just the union between men and women. It's something that's transactional. And when you're talking about when minors are involved, it's definitely transactional. I'm talking about all over the world. It's transactional across a lot of just a lot of lines. So,
okay, legally.
I was gonna say, isn't that what they call it? A dowry?
Yes. So I believe so, yes. That being said, legally, Dr. A.H., if one in law enforcement or in that capacity knows of such a quote unquote transaction, what's the next step after it's been reported and substantiated?
Well, you're talking about something extensive there, particularly if you're talking about what you particularly are referring to as what's commonly called child brides. And
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? Child what?
What you're particularly referring to is commonly called child brides.
Child brides. Okay, thank you.
And that's something that's gained a little attention during this whole trafficking push. In the previous podcast, especially one on vulnerability, I talked about that. In law enforcement, if you came across such a case, that would be something that the detectives would look at, almost kind of like how you see on the #1 cop show, the SVU. And remember, I always ask people, can anyone explain why that cop show is the most popular? Nobody gets the fact that it's because so many people undergo those traumas. And we keep downplaying it, not understanding that there is a lot of this type of trauma out there experienced in the adolescent phase in our nation and in the world now, but definitely in our nation and our communities. In our communities, it looks a little different than the mainstream. And so that's why I posted that one thing in there. We don't get the help and the resources that we need. So the detectives would look at that. If they're in the age of consent, there's probably nothing they're going to be able to do. Um, there are cases where they are below the age of consent. Uh, the men, depending on their culture, may marry a girl that is 12, 13, sometimes as young as 11, 13, 14 years old. And I'm not talking just people from certain parts of what's called the Middle East. There's people in Central and South America, depending on which region they come from, that's a practice. Some of them, I think Judge Joe Brown had even said one time in his statements about having somebody in his courtroom who didn't realize that it was wrong that he impregnated a young girl at 13, because he said, well, my mother had me when I was, no, the girl was 15. And he said, well, my mother had me when I was 14. I didn't, like, what's wrong? We take for granted that everyone is running off the same type of program or the same type of understanding about what's agreeable in our society as far as the age of consent, the age where people can marry, the age where people seem to be responsible, what the rights and privileges of women should be, what the role of a husband or mate should be. And these are very contrived things. These are not just set in stone. As we get more people from different regions of the world coming into our country, both legal and illegally, our community is going to have to deal with that. I remember Dr. Africa in the 90s telling Black women they had to be careful because they were going into these other cultures thinking, oh, I'm going to find me a man that way. And we're getting surprised and taken aback by the behaviors that they had to deal with when they went after these other men, not understanding that the cultures are much more different than what's on television or what they may have heard. Okay, behind your closed doors, no one knows what goes on. So if I, as a policeman, there have been times where I didn't see anybody who was married in that situation. I did. I think I had talked about it before. There were a couple of neighborhood guys that I saw that liked dealing with young girls that I would, sometimes your hands are very limited. So the only thing you can do is give them a hard time and make it hard for them to do what they like to do. So knowing that they like young girls, whenever I would see them talking to girls, I would pull up and then make it a point to talk about, oh, this is a guy that likes to talk to, the young girls. He's 30 years old. This guy kind of looked young, like he was maybe 20, but he was actually 30, like 32, 33 years old. And I would tell the girls, oh, don't you know this guy is 33, and he'd be talking to some teenage girls. In our communities, the kids sometimes are a little fast, a little more grown, and they're like, oh, and they're like, oh, he didn't say that, and once you point out that a guy is lying, it doesn't matter how big the lie is. It's just the fact that he's lying, and that's enough to wade off some women from it. And I remember one that I came in contact with. I literally had to throw him out of this. The grandfather had called because he was taking care of the teenage children. And there was a boy who was like 16, 17, and a girl who was 15. And the 30-year-old guy was there. And she was crying because the grandfather was trying to get him out of the house, throw him out of there. Like, what are you doing here messing around my 15-year-old granddaughter? And the girl didn't want him to leave, and he was like, I'm not going to leave. And of course, I got this like, oh, you're going to leave, I'm going to bounce your behind out of here. And then I was talking to the girl, and she's crying. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, what did you do? And he's like, oh, I didn't mess with that girl. I'm like, you know what? No, this 15-year-old isn't sitting here bawling her eyes out about to die because we're throwing you out of here because, she just liked you. And like, I'm not hearing that. I'm not having that, And so I made it a point, again, on the scene at that moment, your hands are pretty much tied. If you're working, say you're a policeman working your beat, working your patrol, you can refer the guy to the detectives, and yeah, maybe they'll have time, or maybe they'll just put him in the database and say, okay, we know this guy is suspect. for messing with young girls, and if something comes up or somebody's messing with young girls, we might pull him up. He might be one of the ones that we get. Sometimes that's all you can do. Again, if there's a marriage that's going on, I have worked cases down in Florida where the individuals were from different parts of Central America. One was particularly heinous because the family wanted the girl to leave the guy, and he wound up unaliving the girl and unaliving himself. And the way he did himself was particularly unique and weird. And we had to go out and do a lot of digging around, figure out what was going on with that. But it was and the girl was 14, I think. And this guy was maybe like 27, 28 years old from somewhere down in Central America. So it happens much more than people think. Like the coach talked about down in the South, like I talked about my little personal experience I had when I was in the Marines in Millington. But throughout the South, I had noticed that, being from Virginia, you kind of see it. I had a high school girlfriend whose boyfriend before me was 22 years old. So we talking about she was 16 and this guy is 21. Okay, and her mother knew about it, and he was there. And then, to me, it's like, okay, you dating a grown man. He's doing his thing. He's got his car. He's riding around. I'm a teenager like you, living at home, trying to get the car, see if I can go somewhere. Okay, it was very different. But further south you go, there's stereotypes. The stereotypes about West Virginia, how the women are built and how young they are before they start having children. And a lot of that, again, you don't just look at the male side, you have to look at the other side as well. There are some young ladies that want to get married and like the fact that an older man is paying attention to them. If he's established, meaning he's got a job, he's got a place, he's got a car. Sometimes, depending on where you're from, that's enough to, if you're in a small town and she's a 15-year-old that's nice looking, and you figure, well, you know what? She's got about 3 more years and she'll be out of high school, and I'm going to start dating her now so that, maybe in a couple of years, if it works out, we'll go ahead and get married, she'll graduate, then we can start raising a family and doing the stuff we want to do. And I got a choice girl here for myself, and I don't have to play all these games, dating and messing around. And as Coach pointed out, you might be a man who figures, okay, if she's younger, maybe I can control her better, and I don't have to deal with a lot of the backlash or the other stuff, the things that the guy may have experienced and doesn't want to deal with that. In other countries, I put it in the chat that the age of consent is a big problem in the U.S., but in other countries where you have arranged marriages, where you have marriage that happens between young people, again, the standards are set, the expectations are set higher. So it's not so much like our young people, I don't know any young people now that are talking about marriage because somebody got pregnant or they just are that much in love. But we don't teach and educate our children the proper ways and the right ways about life matters. We talk about life matters. Love, sex, and relationships. I mean, who they marry is going to be one of the biggest decisions they make if they even get married. People don't want to get married now. So we're looking at young people and saying, okay, you're going to be popping out the babies, you're having sex. So you got to talk about this sex thing. We got to be real and honest about it. And we got to be more adept about it instead of all this other stuff that they're pushing. Let's push some more common sense reality that's going to help them. As young men, if you don't have an older male in your life that's going to talk to you straight and not put a lot of embellished stuff in there or negative things in there that's going to lead you down a path of negative experiences with women, you before you might figure things out, it may be years, and you may undergo a lot of trauma and create a lot of trauma. So we have to do a better job of that. And being married young, okay, there's a biblical way to look at that. There's a moral way to look at that. Uh, Personally, if I would want younger. I think younger women for young men, older women for older men. Okay, just because. But when I say that, it doesn't mean like the same age. What I mean is, uh, there was a thing with the nation where they were saying, okay, the perfect age for a man, because women have a different capacity than men, was half the man's age plus 7. So when you talk about, say, a 50-year-old man, half of that is 25, and you add 7. So 5 and 7 is what, 12? And then you carry the 1. So that's what, 32? So you got a 50-year-old guy with a 32-year-old woman. So what's a 20-year-old guy? 10 plus 7, that's 17. Okay, let's look at some things and ask ourselves, is there something that we can gauge? There are lots of ways to do some things with what's out there, but we've got to get back to a point rather, where we start employing some things that worked in the past, and they weren't progressive, they weren't so-called nice, but they worked under the conditions we're at. We're under some conditions now that we have to have some answers, and we can't just depend on young people to go it on their own, and depend on these different laws that get passed here. We're happy and we work with them, but they're not going to be the answer for a lot of this deviance and this stuff that these goofballs are doing out here. So let me stop talking.
No problem. That was a great breakdown. So I'm going to go into some sector news, if you will. And your thoughts on this? Coach D, Aunt T is gone for the evening. So hopefully you'll get some rest. And everyone, thank you for showing Aunt T some love. So, jackets. What I mean by jackets are the PEDO and the MOL. So I'm just going to call it PeMo. When a person places these jackets on men, especially the PEDO, Coach D, and your perspective and also your professional capacity, how dangerous, I already know, but how dangerous is that for people just to aimlessly call someone a pedo or MOL? And I'll put my mic on mute.
Yes, I want to say that it is extremely dangerous to call people those type of words, because under the law, that can be characterized as a form of defamation or label. And you can't say things like that are not true and that are not substantiated by fact. And particularly for those who have a certain profession or work in certain fields, and that could potentially damage their credibility, damage the way they're being perceived. That could be damaging. Unfortunately, on YouTube and other social media platforms, there's a propensity for people, when angry or upset with someone, to willfully say things like that. And I've been in sectors where people have been exposed for actually being that. We've had people that have been exposed, and then you had situations where people just threw out words that were not true, and nothing really was done outside of some being told not to do it. But I think that it is definitely irresponsible to call somebody those type of words. And I just wish that YouTube was a lot stricter on things like this.
I think that they're trying to become, excuse me, more strict, but I can attest to what you said emphatically. Just last year, I kid you not, 2 people on YouTube in this particular sector, and you've heard of this gentleman. And again, I'm not calling any names, but they were so quick. And despite some of the things that have come out of this individual's mouth, and I'm not defending at all, but right is right and wrong is wrong. These 2 individuals put out that this person was, I'll just say, a Chester, because this individual had the exact same first name, middle name, and last name. Well, Dr. AH, you already know, and I already know, there are so many people that have the same names, same date of birth, but what these 2 individuals did not do is look a little bit further, or at least call. There are other ways that you can cross-reference. The person that they put this jacket on, African American, but the person who was actually the Chester is Caucasian or white. Now, do you know how dangerous that could have been for that individual? Because you already know, if you go to the can and you already have that label, you're looking for a butt whipping or perhaps more. Dr. AH, if that person wanted to file charges against those 2, could they have done that for defamation, or actually putting not only him, but his family in danger?
Well, they definitely could pursue that, whether you say defamation or slander. And it really depends on where you live. Libel and slander. Libel is written if they wrote something. Slander is if they said something. So, that's the legal definitions. They made an untrue statement spoken orally. Libel is untrue defamatory statement that is made in writing. That's, one of the 3 types. In most states, the defamation is really not a crime, it's a tort. So what you're going to have to prove, almost like the whole Johnny Depp thing, you're going to have to prove that what they said or what they put out there damaged your reputation, damaged your career, damaged your job opportunities. You got to, like in a tort case, you got to show a loss. Okay, you have to show where you're injured. And, so if you have the money, again, unfortunately, the courts work with money, meaning if you can get good representation, there's some free representation out there, some pro bono. Sometimes you could do it yourself, but you can at least start it yourself. And maybe while you're filing the motions and doing the papers and looking stuff up, you can save up some money to get a lawyer to help you out. But that's your only legal recourse. And looking at that, it's very dangerous. Just as the coach said, it can get you, in some places, it can get you killed.
Ooh.
Okay.
And that's the important thing I wanted to, I think Coach D may have gone night really quickly. But that's what I wanted to bring home. As Iopa says, you can ruin someone's life with that, even when they're found to be innocent. There will always be people who will still believe that lie. It is a very dangerous thing to accuse someone of it if it is not true. Absolutely. And as of late in this sector and others, they are hurling those words around aimlessly
Yeah,
with
you have to.
absolutely no proof, just hearsay. And I also understand hearsay sometimes can be important, but unless you have something that's been substantiated, to me, that's just something you shouldn't do. A lot of men already have targets on their backs. And when you add that, just say hypothetically you do that and something unfortunate happens to that man, you open yourself up for a Pandora's box that it will be very hard to close, all because of jumping out of the window or wanting to create content, because we already know drama sells, or the shock value sells. But see, you can't continue to do that. And I've been seeing a lot of this lately. And people, for some reason, don't understand how dangerous it can be to those that you're saying this about.
Yes, the whole issue with all of that is it's not that in particular is very troublesome, and it's been made particularly for men because it's really a lot of men that suffer under this type of slander, particularly in cases where there's a divorce and some type of custody battle is going on. The men's rights groups and some other men's groups have been fighting against that for a while, and some states are starting to pass laws or have passed laws where if you're found liable for making those false claims that someone is this or has done certain things like we're talking about and they haven't, you can be charged, and you will have claims. They can make claims against you where you'll have to pay. So I don't have the stats on how that has changed the accusations, but it's no different than if you said a man violated you or did something. Again, all of those things are things that are starting from a whole different place. They don't just happen at the moment the person is doing that. And people say, "Oh, well, she just said that about him out of desperation, or she didn't have any other recourse, or he said that about the guy because it looked like that to him." Well, as you put, first of all, they didn't do the due diligence. The agencies should do their due diligence, but a lot of times it's not guaranteed that they will. Sometimes the agencies, as we have seen as of late, are acting just off the words of someone and not doing any real investigation until it's too late. Now this person's reputation is damaged, particularly if they have an important job, or you just have a regular job. They could be fired. A lot of people are fired now. People put stuff out on social media, and once it gets out, it's uncontrollable. It's going to spread like wildfire and go everywhere. And trying to repair that is going to take a lot of time. And there's always going to be the question out there, well, if they weren't guilty of it, then why were they accused of it? It doesn't matter if you're really guilty or not. You were accused of it. And so in the court of public opinion, there are people who are going to see you as guilty, no matter what you say, no matter what's been proven, no matter what shows up is your innocence. So that's something that should not be taken lightly. Again, there's certain groups that have been pushing about to get those laws changed about that. But on the general side, if you can prove it, if you can prove the damages, then you stand, as particularly in Maryland, then you stand a good chance to maybe win your case. But for the most part, if you're not going to take somebody to court, if you don't have the resources, if you're not going to pursue it, then you're going to have to go about trying to repair the damage yourself. And again, that could take a long time.
Absolutely. Let's see if Coach D is still with us because I know it is late. Coach D, are you still here? I think not. I think he's gone night night. So the last couple of topics I had, because I'm going to be right after him when I'm done. Your perspective on social media as therapy versus social media as weapons, meaning people bringing events, drama to social media, or perhaps just wanting to speak on certain things. Then you have some who will flip and start disclosing / exposing things that they may have held dormant for years. And instead of contacting that person, and most of the times people have contact, yes, and I understand it is late, and that's why I wanted to do it earlier, but I didn't get off late, so you'll be okay. You'll be okay. But people here lately, for whatever reason, I mean, I have my thoughts and opinions, but using social media as weapons against others because you have a disagreement about something. Your thoughts on that and the dangers and that, bringing innocent people into things. Now, I understand the entertainment value, but I also can see the dangers that a lot of these things, as of late, are causing people. Your thoughts on that? Because I know that you listen to several people, and it's getting. I'll just say it's getting dangerous, in my opinion.
Well, here's the thing about that to me. There's so much clickbait and sensationalism that goes on in social media, and let's just say media as a whole. Okay. Uh, Everybody's in competition to get somebody to look at their material. You can only look at so much. I mean, my watch later queue just keeps growing by the day. And some stuff you get to, some stuff will sit there a month. And by the time you look at it, it's like, you know what? I'm not even going to watch that. I'm not even going to interested in that information anymore. So, you try to be choosy, you try to be correct. There's certain people you watch all the time because the information is relevant. And then there's stuff that you just, everything isn't always serious. So it just depends on what's going on. The people who are doing that are generally looking to do that to make money because it is a money-making platform. Now, using social media for therapy, can it be used that way? Yes. That's not the usual though. The majority of people that are using it for therapy are using it as a way to keep in contact with other people. Remember how I talked about the lonely child that's walking by themselves, or it might be a lonely person that's just there and they don't really have a family. We take for granted sometimes that people have someone to talk to. So they're using the social media to keep in touch with friends or to make a friend that they can share things with. And just that little interaction every day can help boost them to change their mood and keep them from being so depressed or going into a manic state, or give them some ideas on how to keep themselves calm and work on their PTSD. So it can help. The majority, though, are not using it that way. The technology was invented to have a wonderful way for people to communicate and to be able to share ideas and things quickly. Now, in other countries like China, some places in the Middle East, some Russian, or I want to say Eastern Bloc countries, the social media is very restricted and very guarded. There's only certain topics you can talk about. There's only certain ways in which you can use it. Uh, some people agree with it. Some people disagree with it. Uh, you have to ask yourself, how many dance videos do you want your kid looking at, or funny videos where somebody's making some sensationalized joke about something? How many of those do you want them to be able to watch versus videos about being a positive person, or short messages about having confidence and strength, or short little math problems that they work out that stimulates their brain? Okay. Of course, we always want to seek a balance. What we can't say is we know that on our side, as far as the United States, we're out of balance. There's a demonic influence, and we talked about this from a spiritual perspective. There's a demonic influence over our country and over our society, and it's pervasive, and it's getting larger and larger and more control. When we look at these things that are happening, and people say, oh, why is the border that way? Or why is all this fighting? And why is this? And why are these people saying this? And why are these people doing this weird stuff over here? It's not because they don't know what they're doing. These are some of the smartest people in the world. These people have all the resources that you could ever want. They have tons of money. They have so much money they don't even know what to do with it, because they're just losing it and throwing it over here, and let's spend money over here. But we got people out of doors, and black men homeless and not getting medical care. Black women still dying, having birth at third world country rates, but we live in the United States. This is ridiculous. We have to understand that we're under a different influence here. So using social media in ways it wasn't intended, it's all going to come to a head at some point. And it's a foul way to operate, but you're not going to stop people. When there's money involved, they're going to do what they do. Using it for therapy, there's ways in which you can do that. If that's something that is your goal, YouTube is probably not the venue that you want to be on to do that. I would probably limit it to a very closed group, like on Facebook or something like that. But even then, you have to be careful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, there is so much going on, and it's really surprising from the very beginning until what you just spoke of now. What's going on in the sector and below. And right now I'm about to post another link for those that are in the chat, those that were on the panel, and those that'll catch the replay, where they can actually go and see for themselves what I mean by therapy and weaponizing others and potential, and I have to say that, alleged grooming or characteristics that could be deemed as such. Again, we don't know. Goalposts have been moved. Ages, we don't know. Only people who know are those that are there. But to get more information, I have all of the links there. And IOPA says, I'm very happy that you pushed through and had this conversation. It is very important, one, for our people to have. We too often do not talk about, for whatever reason. Absolutely. And he continues up with, I know I sound like a broken record, but can we have a final question? What can we do to break the cycle, or at least try to? Well, I'll take that real quickly, and then I'll let Dr. H take it home. My personal opinion is to continue to have candid conversations. And please know that candid does not always feel good. It's not popular, But to me, and this is my opinion, it's healthy. And the more and more you dialogue, the more and more you could possibly understand where other people are coming from, where they may have come from, or actually see, as Dr. H. and Graham and others mentioned earlier, a place of hurt or perhaps trauma themselves. But at the same time, and again, this is my opinion, I would think that those that truly support you, whether they're your family or your online supporters, at least somebody in that group can see or should be able to see there's a disconnect, and they should be able to speak to that person or call them aside and let them know, hey, brother or sister, no matter what the culture is, because everybody has issues. You may want to look into this, or you may want to speak to someone, or that didn't sound right, or that doesn't seem right, without the fear of being quote unquote excommunicated or kicked out of a group. And I see that often. And that's my opinion on that. Dr. AH, your thoughts on what IOPA has said?
Unfortunately, it depends on which side of the fence you sit on. Um, if you're a doomsdayer, then you believe that nothing is going to change until judgment comes. So the best you can do is live a good life yourself, live by the whatever religious or spiritual code that you and your family have deemed important to you, and do the best you can to keep loving your heart and give love to those that um, need it from you. I won't say unconditional because, as the quote goes, unconditional love is wasted on adults. That should only be given to infants and the elderly. That's just something I heard. I'm not saying that's the best way to go. If you're on the other side of the fence, you say, okay, let's put some things together. Let me find another person I can work with. Start with, like Shahzad Ali would say, start with your family. If you can't get along with the people that you live in the house with, don't start talking about getting along with people in the street. Okay? And so that means you got to bury the hatchet on some things. That means some things you're going to have to let go of. And for family, that's difficult. You know why? Because you see them every day. You know their dirt. You've been with them most of your life. Sometimes you know the bad things that have happened, and so forgetting that may take a while. You know, I forgive, but I don't forget. You know, well, what's the point there if you don't forget? I mean, there's a space in there between them that is probably the correct space to be in, because you got to move on. You got to let the past go, and you got to move on. You got to work towards today. You only have today. Your power is now. Whatever happened in the past happened. You got through it because you're present now. So work in the present. And from the present moment, work with the people you're with. Sometimes that means you don't talk. Sometimes that means you just do what you do. If you come in the house, I clean up what I got to clean up. I fix what I got to fix. I have my little meal. I clean myself and I go to bed. It's a boring existence. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not thrilling. But that may be what you have to do. You have to remember, other generations was much more simpler because they didn't have all the distractions available. There wasn't no laptops or tablets you can carry around, and phones that kept you in contact with people constantly 24/7. Sometimes you got to cut that phone off and say, okay, I don't answer my phone after 10 o'clock. So unless it's an emergency, don't call me because I'm not going to answer. And if it's an emergency, put in this as an emergency. And then, people will start getting the message. Or, whether it's loaning money, I don't loan out money anymore. Or stopping some of your vices. Maybe I could smoke less or drink less. Maybe, I can get more sleep. Every little thing will count, but it's day by day. Stop making big lists I'm going to be this. That's somebody else's life and that's somebody else's program. Your own program is day by day. And like that old saying goes, every day I'm getting better, day by day. And if it's one step at a time, and that's how you get better. You want to
Absolutely.
get better, but you're not going to fix everybody. So you got to work with the willing. If they're not willing, don't waste your time trying to convince anybody. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. If they don't
And
want to get right,
unfortunately,
they don't want to get
that
right.
is a true statement. Oh, you're welcome, Iopa. I hope to have more of these again when it's much earlier. But yes, you're right on the money, Dr. AH. I honestly believe we have a lot of people online that are fighting through some things. We all do, but there's a way, in my opinion, to go about it. And it does not have to be on the shoulders of other people, which brings me to this last point. Please, everyone who's listening now or may catch the replay, in my opinion, those that consider themselves as your internet family, meaning uncles, cousins, aunties, or quote unquote buddies from back in the day, tread lightly with those people, because those are the main ones that will stab you in your back. And if you go to the links that I have posted there, you will see just that. It's unfortunate that this happens, but it does. And a lot of people sometimes will scratch their head wondering or thinking that it's someone that may have said something disparaging about them, when in fact it's someone that has claimed they're your biggest cheerleader. It's always, at least in my experience, the ones that are the closest to you that will hurt you the most and bring more damage to you than those that you would never expect. And that's what I have to say about that. Just be careful, period. Online, offline, in life, just be careful. Because honestly, unless you know people in real life, and that's another thing, do we really truly know people in real life or the representative that they choose to show us? I think that's a better question to ask. Because we can be anybody behind a keyboard. Your final thoughts, Dr. AH, before I close this out? I think he'll be back in a moment. And after he does, I will close this out. And thank you to everyone that joined.
So the whole thing was about the grooming, put on the pedo labels wrongly, and inappropriate behavior. So all of that is inappropriate, okay? And unfortunately, we live at a time where the inappropriate has become acceptable. When the gentleman asked, how do we fix it? It always comes back, like I always say to the individual, you can't control anything outside of yourself. And most of the time you can't hardly control that, but you can control your thoughts and your attitude. So try to get up, whether you're a religious person, a spiritual person, or none of that. Get up. Try to get a positive thing going. All right, Les Brown was saying in one of his lectures, what you hear and listen to in the first 20 minutes after you wake up is going to determine a lot of things about not only your day, but what you get accomplished, believe it or not. So try to get up and listen to something inspirational, positive, something about yourself that's good. Say yourself. Most of our self talk is negative. So try to say good things to yourself. Make up a list of good things to say to yourself, whether they be Bible scriptures or just good things that you like about you. Because that might be the only good thing you hear that day. You know, we talked about social media. Everybody's getting on social media. Who liked me? Who gave me a click? How many likes did I get? How many thumbs up did I get? Okay. Uh, it's hard to get a person to smile at you when you're walking past them in a hallway at work. As a black man, I remember back in 2014, I told a friend, I said, you know what? I never noticed it, but you know, I just been retired from the military about 4 years then, and working at offices, and I said, you know what? I noticed that the women, you know, particularly the women, they look away when you're walking down the hallway and you're looking at them because coming from the military, I'm used to walking and looking at people, keeping my head up, walking straight, walking like you got a purpose. And you know, I wasn't used to people looking away and looking down and like, you know, they don't want to make eye contact with you. They don't want to, definitely don't want to smile. And I know there's some people who say, well, you know, I'm from a rough neighborhood or I'm from a big city and people don't do that. And like, yeah, well, you know what? That's them. I'm not saying you have to be friendly and smile in people's face all the time and all that, but understand that how that affects you. That's why, again, it starts with you as the individual. When you get up, do something appropriate or acceptable for you. And then you'll start recognizing these inappropriate things. And if you have the chance to change them, change them. If you don't worry about it. You don't have to become a crusader and go out there and I'm going to fix the streets or I'm going to catch all these bad guys out here. I'm going to do that. And you run yourself ragged. Handle what you can handle. Sometimes
Absolutely.
you can see somebody that needs to just like, hey, you know, you might want to stop and talk to the young lady and say, oh, I saw you talking to so and so, you know, and then a roundabout kind of way you get around to saying, oh, well, you know what, I saw something strange, and then they're like, you know, you can ask them about that because I would like to know. You can tell me, you know, just Dick Gregory brought that up. You know, we got to start being smart again with what we do instead of accusing people, pointing the finger and judging and criticizing. Start being smart about what you do. Sometimes you got to take it on yourself to figure out what's going on, and then you can give the right guidance. Okay, but it all starts with you. Get up and say something positive and think something positive to yourself, and then you'll have what you need to really make some changes.
Absolutely. I heard a motivational speaker say years ago, when you wake, no matter how you may feel or what challenges you may have, always say, I expect wonderful things. And it may have been Les Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered that and it stuck with me. I expect wonderful things to happen. And once you continue to say that mantra and you start to believe it, you can actually manifest certain things. That's my belief.
Yes,
That's
you
my
can.
belief.
Yes, you can, and you will.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. A.H., Coach D, Aunt T, who was on there earlier, gentlemen, thank you all for sharing, engaging, and again, it's so much that's going on. Hopefully, I can go earlier. I think I can go back. I think in the middle of June, I'll be back on early shift because this is wearing me out. But I'm trying to squeeze in what I can when I get in. But Dr. H, thank you for being up, strong, giving your knowledge and wisdom. It's truly needed. Your voice is truly needed. But yes, these discussions, as I mentioned, they're uncomfortable for some. But these things happen. And as you said, they're happening more than people are actually talking about. It happened back in my mom's days. So why people would think it just stopped? No, people just don't talk about it as much, but it's out there. It truly is.
All right. You have a good night.
You too, sir. Until next time, bye-bye for now. And everyone, take care. Enjoy this June the 2nd and Friday. You all be safe, be well, and be healthier.